He was killed by assassins after being refused a drink at the pub.
A mug of ale for a weary traveler from
Pues
distant
en todo el día
Copenhagen?
no me pasó nada, pero ahorita en la noche me siento cansado.
Si ya te tumbó, trata de dormir entonces, Aid. El dormir ayuda a recuperar defensas. Muy cañón. Trata de ya de planchar oreja.
Led by the Nemesis, who was once known as William the Just, a once heroic warrior that later becomes one of the game's main bad guys. The game first introduces the main character, Kane, as an arrogant as fuck noble who is killed by assassins after being refused a drink at the pub.
A mug of ale for a weary traveler from distant Copenhagen? I can reward you well, for I am of noble blood. I stay open for no man in these dark times. End it!
Kane is then approached by Mortanius the Necromancer, who offers him the chance for revenge. Kane accepts his offer, thinking only the sweet payback them goons are going to get once he finds them.
Victus. I didn't care if I was in heaven or hell. Sometimes, you get what you wish for. The necromancer Mortanius offered me a chance for vengeance, and like a fool, I jumped at his offer without considering the cost. Nothing is free, not even revenge.
And thus Kane
¡Órale! Así se convierte el güey en el vampiro este.
rises as a badass Mac Daddy vampire we know and love. After he manages to catch the goons that killed him and takes them out, Mortanius informs Kane that the assassins may have killed him, but they were not truly the cause of his death. In search of the true cause of his death, and also a possible cure to vampirism, Kane heads to the Pillars of Nosgoth. There he meets Ariel, that explains that he has to restore the pillars before he can find peace, by killing the Pillar Guardians and returning an artifact to each of their pillars. Ariel was a former Guardian of Balance, and was quite a powerful sorceress, and one fine-ass honey who was unfortunately killed before the game starts, and doomed to haunt the land until the land finds salvation.
Nupraptor's keep lay west of Vassabont. I would seek to cut the cancer from its heart.
Mamalón.
So Kane once again begins the next stage of his journey by tracking down and killing Nupraptor, and then returning his head to the pillars and restoring the Mind Pillar.
Very well, old fool. If it is death you seek, I will not deny you.
Next we see Kane targeting Malik, where he has his first run-in with him, but their fight ends in a powerful area of effect spell that forces Kane to retreat. So to defeat Malik, Kane seeks the advice of the Oracle of Nosgoth.
The underground sanctity of the wise Oracle of Nosgoth.
A nobleman, seeking wisdom. Death has taught you well.
Enough philosophy, I seek answers.
Answers indeed.
The Oracle informs Kane about the legions of the Nemesis, and the threat they pose to Nosgoth.
King Atmar, the only hope to defeat the legions of the Nemesis. King Atmar, paralyzed by his princess's malaise. King Atmar, the useless. Pray, good sir, what are the questions? Malik, defender of the Nine, and last of the Seraphim sorcerer priests. His vanity led to the slaughter of the Circle at the hands of the vampire Vorador. For his failing, his spirit was fused to a hellish set of magical armor. He has allowed no member of the Circle to fall since.
What of this Vorador?
Follow the glow of the Ignis Fatuus to the Termagant Forest.
Ignis Fatuus.
The Ignis Fatuus lights the path to hell, nobleman. Your path.
The Oracle gets Kane to find Vorador, and get his help in the form of a ring that will summon Vorador when Kane needs him most.
Good. Take this ring. If you ever need assistance, it will summon you.
While there, Vorador urges Kane to give in to his vampirism and become the G that he was always meant to be.
Drink deep and indulge your gift.
Gift? Vorador thought my curse a blessing. That we were gods. That mortals offered their blood as sacrifice so that we could enjoy our supernatural powers. And somewhere, deep inside my new self, I knew he was right. That mortal dreams were prayers. Prayers to us, begging us for power.
Refusing to bow down to Vorador's wishes and embrace his vampirism, Kain continues to look for a cure and get revenge on those that killed him. So he continues his hunt for the Circle, and soon ends up face to face with 3 Circle members.
Ah, not 1, but 3. Dejul the Energist, Bane the Druid, and Anakroth the Alchemist. How considerate of them to hasten my search.
The Circle members summon Malak, so Kain then calls on Vorador and the 2 ancient enemies fight once more.
Vengeance for my eternity of suffering.
Whelp! As if you knew what eternity was. Grovel before your true master!
Never. I'll hack you from crotch to gizzard and feed what's left to your brides.
Ándale.
While they fight, Kain chases after the Circle members who ran away and catches up to Bane the Druid and Dejul the Energist, fighting both at once in a boss battle where one's a bitch and hard to catch, and the other one hides behind a magic barrier. After Kain defeats Bane the Druid and Dejul the Energist, you find Malak has also been defeated by Vorador, and with their artifacts from all 3, their respective pillars are now restored. While chasing down Azimuth the Planer, Kain gets the Soul Reaver sword, an epic sword so great it literally dismantles people in a single blow. After also getting the Wraith armor, Kain is now ready to face Azimuth the Planer. This chick was another slippery one, summoning demons while shooting magic and teleporting. Luckily, with Kain's fly-ass new threads and epic weapon, the battle was just a matter of time before she falls. Kain then picks up her artifact and on his way out finds a time-streaming device that can be used to mindingly fly his way through time and will come in handy later. Ariel informs Kain that he must now focus on the war against the Nemesis, whose armies are on their way to Willendorf.
'Twas not too long ago
Pilares estaban desde ahí.
that the Nemesis was known as William the Just, a caring and gentle benefactor of the land. But as his army grew in strength, and he himself grew in power, the veil of tyranny fell, and one kingdom was not enough.
Next, Kain unlocks the ability to disguise himself as a human noble, and earns a visit with the King of Willendorf, the humans' mightiest city. On a side note here, Kain hilariously insults this dude on his way to the palace, and I just had to include it in the video.
As I walked among them, I smirked, thinking of the carnage that would befall them at the hands of the legions of the Nemesis, the glorious flames, and the inevitable rape and pillage. Out of my way, peasant! The stench of the fields hangs over you like a pall.
The king sees no one. He is in mourning for the princess.
He'll be in mourning for his kingdom soon, and he'll mourn for you even sooner if you don't get out of my way!
King Otmar, the King of Willendorf, is a shadow of his former self, as his daughter is in a deep magical coma. After the creepy little fuck Elsevir the Dollmaker won a doll-making contest for the princess's birthday, his only request for reward was a lock of the princess's hair.
To celebrate her birthday, I declared a contest. Whoever created the finest doll in the realm would be granted a royal favor.
Which his little prick uses to trap the princess's soul, and thus her body is now lifeless.
Elsevir the Dollmaker created a toy of such beauty that all were captivated by it. And all he would take in payment was a lock of her hair. Soon after, she became like this, a lifeless puppet. Whoever restores her to her former self shall have this kingdom.
Thus, my hunt for the Dollmaker began.
Elsevir, I have come for the soul.
So,
Otmar sent you to kill me, eh? I can smell him on you. Or is that the stench of the grave?
Dollmaker, I have no time for these games.
The soul is mine! I earned it! Otmar gave it to me!
Then you shall earn it with blood.
You shall not have it! Mine! 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 Farewell, my love. I was lucky to have made you.
Toma.
What an odd little man. Elzevir imprisoned the girl's soul in a small fabric doll. The old man's intentions, I shall never know.
Cain recovers the princess's soul, and instead of claiming the throne, only asks for the help of Willendorf's army. King Otmar and Cain rally the troops to fight the Legion, and slay them once and for all.
With the doll in their possession, the court's sorcerers could restore his daughter's soul.
I do not know that I can thank you enough, warrior. My kingdom is but a small price to pay for my daughter's life. Willendorf is yours if you wish it.
'Tis not your kingdom I desire, but your army, Otmar. I require troops to vanquish the horde that descends upon us from the north.
Very well. Courtiers, fetch me my armor and mace. There is war to be waged! The scourge of Nosgoth is upon us, friends. We shall die today as heroes, lest we live tomorrow as slaves. Ready thine arms for Nosgoth!
But the battle doesn't go as planned, and King Otmar dies and his forces get overrun. Left with no other choice than cornered, Cain uses a time-steering device, and is sent 50 years in the past, after which the time-steering device breaks. Mobius then informs the younger version of the Nemesis, who at the time was still William the Just, that a vampire was sent to kill him.
And the news you bring, a vampire sent to slay me? Where did you come upon such knowledge?
'Tis of no consequence, sire. It was only out of concern for your majesty's life.
Ah, yes, the vampire. Mobius told me he would come.
And the epic battle of future evil and undead vengeance clashes. The only one left standing was Cain, and in turn he finds another time-streaming device in the rooms beyond and returns back to his time. This creates a paradox that fucks up the time stream and gets rid of the Nemesis and his legions, but when Cain returns to the present, he finds that vampires are once again hunted. And then witnesses the beheading of Vorador at the hands of the Oracle, who gets the crowd to turn on Cain.
Unholy scourge!
Not yet, my friend. Would you be free of the plague if only one city was cleansed? No! Would you spare one wolf in the pack that has devastated your herd? No! Then let us destroy them all! Yeah! He is the last! Destroy him!
Cain also realizes the Oracle of Nosgoth was actually Mobius the Time Streamer, who leads the hunt on vampires and was the mastermind behind all of Cain's actions until now. Mobius summons foes from past and present to fight Cain, so he kicks some time-traveling ass and what even looks to be his future self until he defeats Mobius, which Cain happily kills, and with Vorador dead, Cain is the last of his kind, the only vampire in a land that once contained so many.
By going back in time and altering the past, you turn William the Just into the Nemesis.
Aye, you have seen my plan, vampire, as I've seen your destiny. The future says you die.
But I am dead. As are you.
Órale.
Cain returns to the pillars to return Mobius' artifact, only to find Mortanius arguing with Anacroth the alchemist, who reveals that Mortanius is a guardian and the arsehole responsible for Cain and Ariel's death. Seduced by the dark entity, later revealed to be a Haldan lord, a mysterious character later explored in future games, Mortanius was controlled and forced to kill Ariel. To correct this imbalance, he created Cain, a creature potent enough to destroy the circle.
You betrayed us, Mortanius. You had Cain killed and turned him into a monster. You set him upon us.
It had to be. Nupraptor's insanity poisoned all of our minds. The Circle had failed in its sworn duties. It had to be destroyed.
Failed our duties? Idiot! The Circle exists for us. We don't exist for it. Our powers will save or damn Nosgoth at our whim. Stand with us, Mortanius, or die.
Then I shall die.
Okay.
If the Circle is to be destroyed, you have to die as well, Necromancer. I admire your cunning, but you will not escape your fate.
Nay, I will embrace it. But my death will leave one more to take, Princeling. Finish me!
Mortanius slays Anacroth and then succumbs to the possession of the dark entity, the one being responsible behind everything that happened in Nosgoth.
You thought yourself a king, when in fact you were a pawn. You have served me well, Cain.
I serve no one.
Indeed, such narrow vision. Don't you see? My silencing of Ariel and its calculated repercussions is but the first act in my theater of Grand Guignol. You are the tragic hero. Play on, little vampire. Play on.
Ve Victus! Ve Victor! Ve Victor!
Cain fights to possess Mobius and slays the dark entity for now. With only one pillar left, Cain realizes that he himself is the final member of the Circle of Nine, and Ariel's successor as the Guardian of Balance. And the cure to vampirism that he searched for was actually his own death. Now faced with a choice, Cain has two options, and two different endings to the game. Cain can embrace his vampirism and rule the land like a boss, damning the world in the process, or bitch out and kill himself, restoring the land and Nosgoth, and ending the vampire race for eternity.
Once I embraced my powers, I realized that Vorador was correct. We are gods. Dark gods. And it is our duty to thin the herd.
Obviously the canon ending is Cain becoming the boss-ass motherfucker he was always meant to be, and accepts his vampirism, and rules the land with an iron fist, which leads to the next game in the series, titled Legacy of Cain, Soul Reaver.
He was unknown, yet by choosing oblivion, he restored balance to the land. Shades cast no shadows.
So that concludes my video on Blood Omen Legacy of Cain. Stay tuned for the next video explaining the story of Legacy of Cain, Soul Reaver, and the introduction of Raziel, the one being to truly challenge Cain. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it really helps the brother out. That's it, peace out homies, until next time.
The Soul Reaver, Cain's ancient blade, older than any of us and 1,000 times more deadly. The legends claimed that the blade was possessed and thrived by devouring the souls of its victims. For all our bravado, we knew what it meant when Cain drew the Soul Reaver in anger. It meant you were dead.
As a weapon which has appeared in every title in the Legacy of Kain series, the Reaver's importance to the overarching story cannot be overstated. The blade's long history connects it to many power struggles and gambits throughout Nosgoth's treacherous and bloody past. From power-hungry warlords to devious sorcerers to vengeful wraiths, the Reaver has fallen into the hands of those who would use its incredible destructive force to achieve their own ends. A complete history of the Reaver is difficult to provide because of the numerous loops it goes through in the timeline, not to mention the gaps in its chronology. While we cannot irrefutably say what became of the blade at certain points in its history, I will nevertheless endeavour to provide an overview of its story, from its creation to its ultimate dispersal. So prepare yourself for a bumpy ride, as we travel across multiple timelines and dive into the intricate lore that is Soul Reaver. Thousands of years ago in Nosgoth's early past, the Reaver was forged by the swordsmith Vorador at the behest of the ancient vampires, in order to defeat their prophesied adversary, the Hilden Champion. Vorador's sire, Janos Audron, along with the other Pillar Guardians, enchanted the blade with sorcery, granting it unique abilities. The most prominent of these abilities was the power to drain its victims of their precious lifeblood, making it a formidable weapon to stand against. At the time of the forging of the 9 Pillars, and the banishment of their Hilden adversaries to the demon realm, Janos was called upon as the 10th Guardian, charged with safekeeping the Reaver until the vampire champion Raziel came to claim it. Eventually the Wraith Raziel would arrive at Janos' retreat, but later than expected during the height of the Seraphan's vampire purge. Janos attempts to give the blade to Raziel, but he rejects it, feeling at once horribly repelled by the sword for some unknown reason to him. At this very moment, the Seraphan forces attack, breaching Janos' chambers after following the path naively paved open by Raziel. The Seraphan storm the retreat, murdering Janos and taking the Reaver with them. A dying Janos conveys to Raziel his importance and advises him to reclaim the blade, as it was forged for him and him alone. Blinded by rage and driven to fulfill his destiny, Raziel pursues the Seraphan commanders all the way to their stronghold, but before he can confront the Seraphan, he discovers the Reaver suspiciously laid across his path. Alone now with the blade, Raziel feels the same inexplicable dread he felt when Janos first presented it to him, and yet he also feels overwhelmingly compelled to seize the sword. Before he can, however, he is interrupted by the Time Guardian Mobius, who takes a few moments to mock and taunt Raziel for playing right into his hands. It's important to note here how Mobius cunningly uses his staff to disable Raziel's Wraith Blade, thereby encouraging Raziel to pick up the Reaver Blade and use it as his weapon.
Using his staff to disable my Wraith Blade, Mobius effectively disarmed me, leaving me with only one choice of weapon. And yet I confess, it was not the lack of options, but blind rage that made me take up the Reaver. In my fury, it felt as though my hand had acted of its own will. And now, that same hand clutched the hilt with unyielding strength, and I felt a constrained tingling, a remote but palpable sense of longing, as the disabled Wraithblade tried vainly to embrace its physical twin.
What I find interesting here is that immediately following this cutscene, Raziel cannot put the Reaver down. Whilst during gameplay, if you try to throw or drop the blade, the game will literally prevent you, as if the sword is exerting some mysterious power over Raziel. Believe me, even trying to toggle into the spectral realm in an effort to force Raziel to release the sword is not allowed. From here on out, to the end of the game, Raziel and the Reaver are inseparable. Fighting his way through the stronghold, Raziel is confronted by his former brethren, Melchiah, Zephon, Rahab, Duma, and Turel, who despite launching fierce attacks on the Wraith, cannot inflict any lasting damage on him. It is said that the sword, which is shaped in the form of a serpent's tongue, is indestructible, as it was forged with the same metal and energy as the pillars of Nosgoth. Somehow, in these crucial moments, its indestructibility passes over to Raziel, its powers making him immune to any physical assault.
As Melchiah and Zephon fell before my blade, I felt the Reaver's bloodthirst as keenly as I ever had when I was still a vampire. I could sense the boundary between us dissolving. The Reaver was consumed with my rage, and I was intoxicated by its bloodlust. The blade had a vitalizing effect on me. My physical energy no longer decayed over time, and the wounds inflicted by my foes healed almost instantly. The Reaver had made me invincible.
After slaughtering his brethren, Raziel arrives at the chapter house, only to find his Sarafan self waiting for him there. Raziel quickly dispatches him as well, ironically mentioning how his history has come full circle. Here we come to one of the most crucial and soul-crushing scenes in the series. Sensing its physical twin, the Wraith Blade manifests and coils itself around the sword before the conjoined blades turn on Raziel, impaling him. And in this defining moment, Raziel realizes the Reaver was never forged to be a soul-stealing weapon. The soul-devouring entity trapped in the blade was and always had been Raziel, driven insane by thousands of years of imprisonment. It is at this point where the blade transforms from being a sword that merely drained the blood of its victims to the Soul Reaver, capable of consuming souls. Well, this would have been the moment if not for Kane's intervention, which by the minutest of chances creates a new timeline. But let's wind the clock back a bit. What you need to know about Legacy of Kain is that this is a story that adheres to strict rules of time travel. The time travel model follows Novikov's self-consistency principle, which can be summed up like this: you cannot go back in time and change history, because you didn't. Legacy of Kain flips this on its head and essentially says, if you do go back, then you did go back, which means that the timeline is essentially fixed, and anything the protagonist does in the past was already part of that established course of events. This is eloquently explained by the title character himself.
You must understand, our presence here doesn't alter history. You and I meet here because we are compelled to. We have always met here. History is irredeemable. Drop a stone into a rushing river. The current simply courses around it and flows on as if the obstruction were never there. You and I are pebbles, Raziel, and have even less hope of disrupting the time stream. The continuum of history is simply too strong, too resilient.
Rather than having a history that is fragile and easily altered, reality is actively being conserved. Time is essentially immutable, apart from one exception to the rule, a loophole involving the Soul Reaver. In fact, this exception has been exploited at least 3 times across the games. As such, 4 known timelines exist in the series, 3 of which have sprouted off one after another, altering fate. Going back to when the Reaver impales Raziel, everything that happens chronologically up to this moment can be referred to as Timeline 1. Let's ignore Kane's interference for now. In the first timeline, he actually never shows up to pull the sword out from Raziel's body. Therefore, all that's left for Wraith Raziel is to dissolve into dust, while his soul is swallowed up by the blade. The first timeline will continue as normal, presumably with Mobius coming to collect the blade, and retaining possession of it for the next 450 years, until the birth of the beloved boy king, William the Just. Mobius would eventually journey to William's kingdom, seeking an audience with the king, while addressing and rallying crowds of villagers with hateful speeches against Nosgoth's vampire population. These were apparently rousing enough to grant Mobius his audience. It is at this point when Mobius gifts the Soul Reaver to William that he warns him of a vampire menace who would seek to take his life. Sometime around then, a future version of Cain attempts to assassinate William, but fails, which allows history of the first timeline to proceed as normal, with William placing more of his trust in Mobius, who he employs as his advisor. Over the ensuing 40 years, the time streamer will continue to poison William's mind, gradually transforming him from a kind and righteous monarch into a sadistic tyrant known as the Nemesis, who conquers and ravages Nosgoth with his fanatically loyal and ruthless army. While the legions of the Nemesis march from the north to decimate all in their path, a young but ambitious vampire conveniently discovers a future incarnation of the Soul Reaver on his journey through Avernus Cathedral.
Time fades even legend, and the origin of Soul Reaver has been lost long ago. But its purpose remains, to feed on the souls of any creature it strikes. Kindred, this blade and I.
Taking the fabled soul-devouring weapon as his prize, the fledgling Cain continues on his quest to cleanse the Circle of Nine, but soon finds himself embroiled in a human conflict between the legions of the Nemesis to the north and Willendorf's army of the Last Hope. Willendorf's army is completely outmatched by the Nemesis's horde, forcing Cain to flee nearly 50 years into the past. Cain realizes that if he kills William here at this early stage of his life, the Nemesis and his unstoppable legions would never come to exist. So Cain does what he thinks is logical and attacks William, who just so happens to be in possession of a younger version of the Soul Reaver that was gifted to him by Mobius. The clash between the two seemingly indestructible swords breaks William's Reaver and triggers the first paradox, killing William and reshaping history, creating the second timeline. This power to alter time is a quality unique to the Soul Reaver that goes far beyond its original design. The gist of it is that since the Reaver acts as a vessel for Raziel's spirit, it can dislodge history, creating paradoxes and new timelines when brought into proximity with Raziel or another version of itself.
Mobius propelled William and me together, but ensured first that we were both armed with the Soul Reaver. The Reaver is the key. Two incarnations of the blade meet in time and space. A paradox is created, a temporal distortion powerful enough to derail history.
The second timeline is similar to the first except for one notable distinction. The Nemesis and his armies are removed from the equation, leaving a fanatical mercenary cult in their place, bent on exterminating all vampires in the name of their martyred king, which was exactly what Mobius was aiming for. William's broken Reaver, now recovered by Mobius, is brought to the Sarafan stronghold. It is held here within a chapel, dedicated to the fallen king, with the two pieces of the sword placed on the sarcophagus. A version of Raziel from the distant future, before having his soul imprisoned in the sword, discovers William's chapel. Armed with an older Reaver, his own twin soul, the Wraithblade, Raziel unintentionally activates another Reaver convergence. Although this one does not ignite any fatal paradoxes, he does find his soul being leached to restore the blade. I particularly enjoy how terrified Mobius is in this scene. Raziel may not comprehend the significance of the two Reavers coming together, but Mobius sure does. That's why he's trembling. Normally history would not allow Mobius to die here, because he is fated to die at Cain's hands. For the most part, Mobius is assured in his belief that something will always happen to preserve his life, until his preordained death. But here, with the Reavers together like this, history is close to a paradox. If Raziel strikes him down right now in this very instant, his plans will completely unravel, and history would be forced to change.
These blades, now coiled in sinister embrace, have inspired terror in the hearts of creatures far more durable than you, old man. Bound together as they are, I can only imagine what they could do to your soul's fragile shell.
Raziel, I beg you to stay your hand.
This was none of my doing. I have sought only to aid you in your righteous quest.
Why, you're trembling, Mobius. Has your confidence abandoned you? You seem to have made a fatal error by leaving your precious staff behind. Is that where all your courage comes from?
Mobius is of course able to talk and manipulate his way out of this. And lucky for him, because if Raziel did decide to go through with killing him, it'd be game over for the Time Streamer. I don't even think the Elder God would have been able to bring Mobius back from a paradox like that. Raziel would later visit William's chapel again, only this time to be confronted by an older Cain. Discussing the true nature of Nosgoth's history, Cain explains to Raziel how time is fixed and cannot be altered except for a loophole which can be exploited by bringing two Soul Reavers together. As he says this, Cain approaches Raziel with the Reaver from William's altar, causing the Wraith Blade to manifest from Raziel's arm. Cain then surprises Raziel by offering the physical blade to him by the hilt. Thinking he's gained an edge over Cain, Raziel quickly presses his advantage, threatening the Vampire King, only for the conjoined blades to begin acting of their own volition. They tug at Raziel and pull at him in an effort to compel him to end Cain's life. Cain concedes that this is the moment where he is destined to die, and that Raziel is the only one among them all with free will. He alone has the power to change fate. Consequently, this scene can play out one of two ways. Either Raziel kills Cain and continues on his quest for knowledge, travelling through different time periods until he is consumed by the original Reaver, or Cain persuades the Wraith into not killing him, with Raziel barely diverting the blade and instead driving it into William's sarcophagus. If the latter of these two outcomes occurs, then the second paradox is set in motion, and history again is reshuffled to accommodate Raziel's decision. It is important to understand that while Raziel may have a degree of free will, he is not unwriting history, he is simply rewriting it. The future courses around the actions of our protagonists, finding the path of least resistance, while omitting only the slightest alterations. This can be seen in the reshuffling Raziel experiences when he refuses to kill Cain. Whether he elects to finish Cain off or not, Raziel abandons the physical blade, which we can assume is picked up yet again by Mobius and brought to Avernus Cathedral for a much younger Cain to eventually find, who would of course use it in his duel against William, setting Mobius's own cunning plans in motion. Now, after eliminating the remaining members of the Circle and clearing all obstacles from his path, this younger version of Cain fully embraces his vampirism and savours his victory by appointing himself as Nosgoth's new ruler. Stretching his empire out across the furthest corners of Nosgoth, Cain retains possession of the sword over the next millennia, with it becoming his signature weapon. He wields it during his Lieutenant Raziel's execution, and still holds the Reaver centuries later when Raziel returns as a Wraith. During their first encounter at the Pillars, Cain brings the blade down on Raziel, but this paradoxical meeting of two versions of the same soul causes it to shatter, freeing the Wraith blade within. Binding itself to Raziel, it becomes his symbiotic weapon.
The blade is vanquished. So it unfolds. And we are a step closer to our destinies. I swore I saw a glint of satisfaction in Cain's eye when the Soul Reaver was destroyed. I did not understand the game that Cain was playing, but I knew the finishing move.
From this moment and ever afterward, you and this blade are inextricably bound. Soul Reaver and Reaver of Souls, your destinies are intertwined. By destroying the sword, you have liberated it from its corporeal prison and restored it to its true form, a Wraith blade, its energy unbound. No longer a physical blade, it can only manifest itself in the material realm when your strength is fully restored. Once manifest,
It will sustain you.
Much like its physical counterpart, the Wraithblade was the most powerful weapon in the games, and could easily dispatch most enemies with a few hits, followed up with a finishing move. After dealing with his vampire brethren, Raziel takes the Wraithblade with him as he pursues Kain into the distant past. It seems incredible to me even now that this is actually the third time the Wraithblade gets to redo all these pivotal moments, which it first went through as Raziel, then as the physical blade, and finally as the unbound blade of energy attached to Raziel's arm. Everything that I mentioned before, including the restoration of William's Reaver, to the fatal confrontation with Kain, to Raziel's impalement, is a tragic chain of events that is destined to play out in this inexorable cycle for all eternity. By sparing Kain and triggering the second paradox, Raziel in turn postpones the devouring of his own soul, thanks to Kain actually being present this time around to tear the blade out from Raziel's chest. It's a crucial scene, but with dire consequences. The room warps around the pair as the future strains to reshuffle itself for a third time. However, given the look of horror slowly mounting on Kain's face, he realizes that by saving Raziel, he may have just paid a terrible price.
Behind Kain's eyes, I could see new memories blooming and dying as history labored to reshuffle itself around this monumental obstruction. And I could see by the dawning horror on his face that perhaps we had strained history too far this time. That by trying to alter my fate, he may have introduced a fatal paradox.
My God. The Hilden. We walked right into their trap.
This was the biggest divergence to the timeline, and was the one that ended up creating the most changes. By helping to bring the Hilden Lord back from the demon realm, providing him with a suitable vessel, and even altering history to the point where he ended up in possession of the Reaver in Blood Omen 2. But let's not dwell too much on Blood Omen 2. What's important is that the third paradox paved the way for Raziel to visit the Spirit Forge and purify the Reaver of all corruption before using it to heal Kain at the very end of Defiance. Ultimately, Raziel selflessly allows himself to be drawn into the blade, which creates the physical Soul Reaver, while also freeing his future spirit from an eternity of imprisonment. It's quite fitting in a way. Raziel has both imprisoned and freed himself in the same instant. And that is basically a complete chronological timeline of the Soul Reaver. There are of course other moments that involve the sword in the series, but the ones I mentioned I think are the most significant. In the end, one should think of the Reaver as a key which can redeem or damn Nosgoth depending on how it's used. It can kill Kain, sundering the pillars to an eternity of collapse and decay, or purify him, allowing new guardians to be born. Notably, the physical Soul Reaver is the only weapon that exists capable of hurting the Elder God, making it an integral piece in Kain's ambition to rid the world of the parasitic Elder and restore the land. The last glimpse we see of the blade is with Kain holding it while pondering Raziel's sacrifice. It is not definitively known what happens to the blade after the climax of Defiance, but we can guess that Kain would leave it at the base of the pillars for a certain time streamer to find, thus allowing all these events to transpire again, starting with Mobius passing the Soul Reaver over to William. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoy Legacy of Kain and my content, do leave a like and consider subscribing for more in-depth lore videos. Have a great day, and I hope to see you all again.
Órale. Nice. Bien. Ah, Iván, no te había visto que ya andamos por acá. Está larga la cinemática, sí está bien larga. Bien larga. La verdad es que entendí como que parte de... Hay aquí como... Ay, no sé. Lo que son detalles así del pasado, el futuro, cómo hay como un colapso por el movimiento del tiempo. Está padre, se me hace interesante. Y aquí a Kane te das cuenta de todo lo que le ha pasado. Tú juegas los otros y Kane es como que, amigo, o que es el vampiro. Sí. Ok.
Storm is coming. Mankind faces ruin and despair. The world is changing, yet hope remains in the hearts of the people. We go about our daily lives never knowing the forces that can change our destinies forever. We are oblivious, ignorant like sheep to the slaughter. This night, in the year of our Lord 1047, marks the beginning of our journey together. A journey into darkness, into madness. I watch him from the shadows. Is he the one? He has come far already, but he will be tested, tested to the very limits of human endurance and beyond. This night he rides looking for the old gods, armed with an amulet that has led him here. Tonight he will begin his journey into oblivion. The struggle for supremacy is eternal, inevitable. Victory is the natural objective of every creature on this world. They will kill and die for their kind to dominate. Some call this eternal struggle equilibrium, the balance between light and darkness. These are dark times, times without hope. Men of faith claim that this is a test from God to strengthen our spirit. Perhaps this is true, or perhaps it is simply a pious lie. If it is true, darkness has come to engulf once proud humanity, and we are witnessing the end of mankind.
¡A la madre! No había visto eso. Esto dura 3 horas 37 minutos. No, no, por supuesto que no. No, 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 no. Me niego, no, no, no. No, por supuesto que no. 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 Ah, qué barbaridad. ¡Qué barbaridad! Ok. No lo voy a ver. No, están locos. No, no, no. No. Ok.